The alarm goes off at 5:15 in the morning, and before the sun even begins to rise, before there's even a hint of light breaking through the sky, he's already awake, eyes open, staring at the ceiling for a moment as he lets his mind catch up with his body. Because being an electrician isn't something you ease into slowly. It's a job that demands awareness from the very first second you're conscious. A job where you don't get the luxury of being careless or distracted, because what you work with every day, electricity, is invisible, silent, and unforgiving. So after that brief pause, he exhales, sits up, and starts the routine he's repeated hundreds of times before, pulling on work pants that are worn in all the right places, boots that have molded to his feet over years of use, and a hoodie that's picked up dust, insulation fibers, and the smell of job sites over time, then heading into the kitchen where the first real task of the day begins. Not wiring, not troubleshooting, but making coffee, because coffee isn't just a habit in this line of work, it's a necessity. Something that sharpens the edges of your mind before you step into a job where precision matters. And while it brews, he checks his phone, scrolling through messages that have already started coming in, maybe a contractor adjusting the schedule, maybe a homeowner asking if he can look at something real quick, which in experience almost never means quick, maybe a note about materials arriving late or an inspection being pushed back. And already, before the day has even officially started, plans are shifting because that's the nature of this job. Nothing is ever perfectly fixed. Everything moves, everything changes, and by 5:45, he's out the door, stepping into the early morning air. The world's still quiet, streets mostly empty, and his van sitting there waiting, loaded with everything he'll need: wire spools, tools, testers, drills, ladders. Because an electrician's van isn't just transportation, it's a mobile extension of the job itself, a carefully organized system where every tool has a place and every item has a purpose. And as he drives through the still dark streets, the sky slowly beginning to shift from black to deep blue, there's a kind of calm before the intensity of the day begins, because once he arrives on site, that calm disappears and everything becomes movement, calculation, and execution. And when he pulls up, whether it's a house still in its skeleton phase or a commercial building halfway through renovation, the first thing he does isn't grab tools or start working, it's observe, because before any wire gets run or any connection gets made, he needs to understand the space, walking through slowly, looking at where the panel is located, where circuits will need to travel, where outlets and switches will be placed, mentally mapping out something that doesn't yet exist. Visualizing the invisible pathways that electricity will eventually flow through. And if it's new construction, that means dealing with open framing, wooden studs exposed, giving him the ability to run wires cleanly, drilling through beams, feeding cable through precise paths, measuring distances so everything lines up perfectly with where walls will eventually close. Because once drywall goes up, mistakes become much harder and more expensive to fix. And if it's an older building, that's where things become unpredictable, because now you're dealing with history, layers of work done by different people over different decades. Sometimes finding wiring that no longer meets modern code, sometimes opening a box and seeing connections that make you pause, wondering how it ever worked safely in the first place. And that's where experience becomes critical, because an electrician isn't just someone who installs, they're someone who interprets, who deciphers past decisions, who understands not just how things should be, but how they were, and how to safely bridge the gap between the two. And by the time the rest of the crew starts showing up, framers, plumbers, contractors, the job site comes alive, a coordinated chaos where everyone has their role, but all those roles overlap. And timing becomes everything, because you can't run wires if framing isn't finished. You can't finalize installs if walls are already closed, so communication becomes just as important as technical skill. And as he starts working, pulling wire through studs, securing it neatly, making sure nothing is loose or messy, there's a rhythm to it, a kind of repetitive motion that might look simple from the outside, but is backed by constant calculation, nodes balancing, circuit distribution, ensuring everything complies with code, because every decision made now affects how safe and functional the system will be years down the line. And as the morning continues, the physical side of the job sets in. Crawling through tight attic spaces, kneeling on beams, reaching overhead for extended periods, dust settling onto clothes, insulation clinging to skin, arms starting to feel the burn from repetitive motion. But even through that, there's a certain satisfaction because piece by piece, something invisible is taking form, a network that will eventually power lights, appliances, entire lives inside this space. And when he pauses briefly, maybe leaning against a wall, taking a sip of water, looking around at the progress, there's a quiet acknowledgement of how far things have come since the start of the morning. Even if there's still a long way to go, and then without much hesitation, it's back to work, because in this job, time moves quickly, and there's always more waiting to be done than there are hours in the day. As the day pushes into the afternoon, the nature of the work begins to shift, moving away from the rough physical process of running wires and into the more precise, detail-oriented phase where everything that's been installed now has to come together and function as a complete system. And this is where the focus intensifies, because it's no longer just about placement, it's about performance. And that means heading to the electrical panel, the central hub where every circuit connects, where everything converges into one organized system, and standing in front of it, there's an understanding that this is the point where mistakes matter most, because a single incorrect connection here doesn't just affect one outlet or one switch, it can affect entire sections of the building. So each wire is handled carefully, insulation stripped back, just enough to expose the copper without leaving too much bare, connections made cleanly and securely, each breaker assigned correctly, each circuit labeled clearly, because clarity isn't just for today, it's for anyone who might work on this system in the future. And once everything is in place, there's a brief pause before power is introduced. A moment where everything is still theoretical, where the system exists only as a collection of potential, and then the breaker is flipped, and suddenly everything becomes real. Electricity flowing through pathways that didn't exist just hours earlier. And this is where the testing begins, moving from outlet to outlet, switch to switch, verifying that power is present where it should be, that voltage levels are correct, that nothing is overheating or behaving unexpectedly. And sometimes everything works exactly as planned, but often there's something, a connection that needs tightening, a circuit that needs adjusting, a minor issue that reveals itself only once the system is live. And that's part of the process too, going back, retracing steps, identifying the problem without rushing, because rushing is where mistakes happen, and mistakes in this line of work aren't just inconvenient, they can be dangerous. And on service calls, the challenge becomes even more focused, because instead of building something new, you're solving something broken. Walking into a home where someone says half the lights stopped working or outlets suddenly went dead, and now it becomes a process of elimination, checking breakers, testing lines, opening up outlets and junction boxes. Sometimes finding that the issue is something simple, like a tripped GFCI hidden in a garage or bathroom, and other times discovering something more complex, like a damaged wire behind a wall. And those are the moments where experience truly shows, because there's no clear guide, no step-by-step instruction, just logic, knowledge, and patience, working through possibilities until the answer reveals itself. And when it does, when the issue is fixed and power is restored, there's a visible shift in the atmosphere. The frustration that was there before replaced with relief, and while it might seem like a small thing to the outside world, restoring electricity, getting lights back on, bringing systems back to life carries a certain weight, because electricity isn't just convenience, it's essential. And as the workday starts to wind down, tools begin to get packed away, each one returned to its place in the van. Not just out of habit, but out of necessity, because tomorrow will come quickly, and being organized now means being ready then, and the drive home feels heavier than the drive in, not just physically but mentally, because hours of focus, of problem solving, of physical labor all settle in at once, and by the time he gets home, kicking off boots that have carried him through the day, there's a sense of exhaustion but also completion, because something was built, something was fixed. Something that didn't exist or didn't work now does. And even though most people will never think about the systems behind their walls, will never consider what it takes for a simple flip of a switch to bring light into a room, there's a quiet understanding that this work matters, that behind every powered device, every lit space, every functioning building, there's effort like this making it possible. And as the evening settles in, there's a brief window of rest before it all begins again. Another day, another site, another system waiting to be brought to life. Because in this line of work, the routine never truly repeats, but the purpose always stays the same.